Hello, I'm Michael Heller. I'm going to start out reading today from Accidental Center, which was my first major collection, and I want to read a poem from which the title was taken, a line in that poem. This poem is called Pressure. Didn't you say you loved me? Under what conditions? Under what? Under what? Under what? Under the air at 15 pounds per square inch on the roof, on the safety factored I-beams slipping down through curtain walls to the ground, to gravitational bedrock, accidental center, home, which we sailed from under black and glitter, irony and smugness, facing out on the frozen rocks of the universe, the hard energy, spectral pinpricks, excitations given and received, the pulsar's wave peak falling from enormous source on the steel mesh of the antenna, drowning the signal of the probe impaled on the far-off planet, whim and fantasy and power, the radio at sea, the monstrous groans of the empty airwaves for 2 days, midpoint Atlantic, now to face ourselves amid the gush of plumbing, the whir of ventilators packing air into the cabin. My God, what we felt one night on the deck of the Novi, the beat of engines through her plates, overhead the tenuous milk clouds, their silent movements, myriad possibilities, concrete and eternal, spaced as waves. Feel this, she said, wanting desperately my participation, awash in the bombarding cosmic rays, in the mysterious cosmos itself on the heights of cause and being. I'm very much interested in science as a metaphor of existence in much the same way that poetry is, and I have a scientific background, and I made use of the scientific imagery in my work, particularly in this first book. And this is a poem which kind of gets into that whole aspect of science. It's called the Cardiac Poem, and it's about the transplants and what does it mean to have a heart transplant and extend one's life and so on. This poem is in a number of sections, and I'll just read the numbers as I introduce each section. The Cardiac Poem. The patient's heart, a way to keep modern, the thought fierce, little trip hammer of a beat to plow a body through that much more time and space. At first there was a wobble, a neutral, a scientific wobble, simply a matter of fit. 2, and later they make it fit. Oh, imagining the recessional, as if time leapt back, the way sun is seen at 6 p.m., a great red ball, and a minute later on the world's rim, distended by the thick waves of air, the way we must seem from the point of view of the sun, and at 7, all is dark. 3, the aura I have made round you, meaning you are its heart, its center, is more than fleshing out, is beauty the way frost coats a tree to the finest tendrils of its branchings. Oh, the delicacy of the image, though neither you nor I are fragile, the frost is, it snaps or is defrosted at the end of a cycle. 4. And in dream, the doctor, white coat and stethoscope, an Aztec priest, but a thief, stealing what belongs to the sun, secreting it in the open, swimming cavity. After the stitches, after the wipe-up, after the groggy headache of anesthesia, someone would realize in what way it had been offered up. 5. Via Cain or via Abel, in what way, if it happened, it could kill you? Just hearing thump, silence, thump at night. The panic of love and not love twisted round you. 6. Shaky heart, bird, its salt pulse song that keeps one alive. I love you, that I Ching of possibility which has been grasped and pulled beyond me till it is no longer me nor you. 7. A flutter, a seizure, thick fibers that contract, a bird crushed in a cage of tissue and fluids, the heart sac. How many medieval men saw the heart? How many see the unnatural heart of arts and letters? 8. At what end of what thing do the names of the gods change from ennui or loneliness? There isn't anything we can't do now, not one thing. A wall is a wall, and what of a wall? Have you ever seen them harvest wheat, the scythe death of wheat? One more poem from this book. It's a poem called Telescope Suite, and in it I mention the observatories on Mount Palomar and Wilson, a couple of the constellations in the sky. Telescope Suite. Say I wanted you in that room on that cold, clear night and couldn't have you. Say I looked at the stars. Say there was love in the sky, but it wasn't enough. A young woman, a Dane, tells me of 5 years drifting in the U.S., of a shack up under cloudless prairie skies, looking past her lover's shoulders at the height of it. Her eye caught the fine stellar dust, sparking in the upper air in long, luminous tendrils, and she suffered then a terrible kind of peace and estrangement. What she meant was, on the star map there were forms and dotted lines, ink round the clusters, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, or that one might see for himself in the far-flung galactic arms images of women, the nebula's vaginal whirls, or in the black holes the sex of the universe itself, an old, an untrue irrelevance, but that one knew they were always out or nowhere, vivid and trembling, but out. Though of hurt or wound there was no escape, no need to look nor hope to find sweet Elysium of astral tides, lifting lovers to their wants, the world's sore wants that nakedly confront. But in starlight, star-crust diadem, out which being looks, hidden behind Heraclitian signs, they were small and gathered on the silvered glass. Break it into discourse and pleasure, focus and delight, where there was nothing. But that the eye, until one got used to it, was nearly closed. No one believed in the star on the reticle, or its existence momentarily on the rods and cones, or what is somehow touched by the mind, because space is and curves around to let us pass from one profitless void to another, so they say. And it is inhuman that I feel such loss and know the feeling of the vacuum, huddled on the planet, huddled in need with eyes turned out, and the stars seemed gathered on the lens piece, gathered from the mirror poured from molten glass and cooled slowly for years. A narrative in the glass, the narrative of ourselves, never enough. And the worlds and stars drift, the computers give them meaning, meaning enough, but the vacuum is unexplained. Say I loved you. I did not wonder who we were, neither the visible nor the invisible of what was meant. On Palomar and on Wilson, in the cold air, the shining domes, or the great dish-shaped nets hung across the southern valleys, I can imagine them in daylight or at midnight, open as our arms are. I have a little summer house out in the Hamptons. There's a poem about Montauk. It's called Montauk. It's more modern work, recent work. Montauk. The compact with the sea is as strange as the rest of life, but we have forsworn the waves' repetition, the changes of the finite. I had hoped in our modernity, at least, the lesson of its efficient cause was ours, is when the gull dives and the fish forewarned by the shadow darts. But we are caught in the portent's thrill and want the tide, the knife's dark face that cuts death into desire, whether it wash us to the beach or take us. It's a poem about a relationship. I hesitate to call it a love poem. The toast. Dapples this glass the wine, the hearth coals embered flies in its fine crystal. You across the room, elbow or strand of hair, pinioned in the reflection, amid red liquid, amid red glowings, difficult loveliness, unknowable star of this warm composition. Let the eye go from there to you. Let it break from the glass where lingering spares the shock of the next mote of deadly beauty. And now there's but a pledge, another pledge of the voice which bears despair in its tremolo, as we both swear to the image unproved, meant to shatter this refracted prison. Knowledge. To think a man might dream against this something simpler than metaphor, the world which spoke back in facts to him, that heavy pageantry. Yet when the life or when the bed was empty, he'd lay his head among the voices of the dead. It was his child and his childhood. It was coats and books heaped in a room, toys and an ache. Here's another poem from the Hamptons. There's a little harbor there called Accabonac. This poem is called Visitor at Accabonac. Last night's rain washed mud into the estuaries. Today the water is burnished, impermeable, non-reflective under the sun's flat hit. Down the beach, some distance from the bathers, gulls walk along a sandy ledge. The moon afloat in daylight, a chalky, hallucinatory eye above the tide's gray, dead, sluggish weight, suggesting only what is isolate, what cannot link. This is a world of forms, of manners, of voices and cries of birds shredded in the reeds, in the stunted pines. These intact islands amid these minor eddies of the human, with their small distances to be spanned. At the harbor mouth, one comes upon shingled houses, desolate on hummocks, on low spits of sand. And the white sails of pleasure boats catch sun like perfect messages, perfect dreams that ply between. This poem is dedicated to George Oppen, a person who's influenced my work a great deal. It's called Leaving Grand Central. On the way to a sunlight of lawns and suburbs, to find oneself caught in the train's swaying, the smudged windows thistling of a few lights. At the windows with faces set, to look out past dusty reflections, past girders crossed and blackened with smoke, which hold the roof, the careless heaven of the paving above one's head. This is not our world, one wants to say, this channel which will spew us into a daylight of blocks and blocks of utter ravishment. And as the bridge is crossed in the windless day, barely a current moves under the imaged buildings, and what little guilty cry the heart makes for safety and escape, to be borne past the towers and low rows of flats, to see behind the brick and glass those trapped in the real apparition. Here the window does not mirror back. I want to read a long poem in 9 sections, a poem called Objurgations. And the title is taken from the word to objurgate, which is to bring to law, to kind of bring against the law almost. In this sense, a certain harshness about our human situation, which I've tried to get at in this poem. This poem has 9 sections. Objurgations. 1. Talk in the room, the voices thick with lyric, and to hear the facts bend in, deflected from the absolutes of wall and floor, of limit and definition. To speak of things in terror, in the brutal cognates of love and desire, until, like the floor's worn boards, beneath which gape the hollows of the building, one's meaning gains some small shine. 2. Rooms scar the mind, empty rooms which punish for love, yet the place is fulfilled, indicative, Shut the door, draw the blinds, no closure here but that of carpentry. The walls, the bric-a-brac are heralds and extend themselves. It could as well happen beyond these walls, as well in the world, the part-willed of the world. There, to have arrived severally, perhaps interested, to consider, exchange, to equilibrate the goods and lives, to watch the crowds move, reflect, make over their movement into purpose, to walk, to be buried, to be huddled in their bulk, to go from them cheated and hated, and to hear later others felt that way, yet in the numberless storms of event, to find no one who meant that this should happen. 3, Naje's photograph. To watch them moving, and the moving either lovely or ugly. To discover cause and no place close to it. To read from the street signs, the placards, the shops, the days of traffic and trafficking, seemingly impossible of error. Thus to fear a mystery less than certainty, to fear the terror of explanation, to impose rules, to judge, to discover motive and reason, to go beyond reason, until, like the monkey in the photo, one is stranded on the structure of the world, grinning from that bare pole. 4, which is the danger of the literal, meaning to search for what you might love, not what might love you. To find up close it's still what it is. To know the gods have fled, to know myth only as this moment, to know the breast which bears your head and your humility is not your mother's breast. This is the danger of the literal. 5, where is that moment when the poem, like a worm, painfully parts the tissue, spiraling down the psyche, dark turn on turn toward some light of true cause, finding, nibbling, feeding on that cause, till it's we who are the worm in the poem and cringe in its light? For this is how the world we call beautiful came into being, and the worlds through which we move, even its trees and rocks, are the absurd works of men, things to which they have given beauty only half theirs to give, and it is conquered, even with ecology finished, and only that not begun, not by us at least, has any power. 6, thus, whether the word is found or finds us, it is inserted in history, though now we are told is no time for a bon mot, to suspect and not from error that one seeks an identity of a mathematical sort, standing in the world, functioning as some imperfect equal sign, because both sides of that equation always balance. There is no other way to look at it. Therefore the horror must be let in, and like Tufu, one keeps music and writes to conquer his failings, to keep a machine clean in a filthy time, to seek meaning for compassion, meaning don't let self-definition perish, to be condemned thus from the beginning, no time when it was different and not different, no time when all this seemed more expendable. 7, like the newly hatched duck placed beside the basketball, took it for its mother, that we're determined or not is beside the point. If we're born with attraction towards a thing, even the wrong thing, it's also toward ourselves. Neither the mob at the spectacle, nor Homer at the wars is a singular. if I must prove this and not do so by exception, that I, for the sake of hatred, might have lusted for a woman, then grew to love her deeply for having let me come, isn't it to say the poem is now and then our master? It bears our beatitude for what's most unholy, even our outsized hate, so thraldom and the whole schema, you little shits, which I would bomb and bulldoze if I were king. Ha. 8. The cities and the bluntly shining stars, clusters that can gleam with use, a dispensary, grab for them the thing we're taught, as indeed the last word of the poet's reading was stars. And after we walked to the pier, one star in the sky, I said it was Venus, imagined it the star which gathers love and world. And in the half-truth of the metaphor, the point it holds is clear and steady. And yet the small lights in streets, the strung necklace of the bridge, no more than compliment. 9. Light among buildings, catching the sharp edge of stone, familiar yet isolate. He, this brick, this city. Stories in the streets, places given names, memory and fantasy made real. To feel one had the meaning wrong, the era not of increment but tone, not of the gods, not even of their house, but we had seen the thing like a god or like some manufactured part sitting in the sun. Yet to tell of the difference between our worship of the dream and the worship done in dreams, to wake in that room, that world, the sky grown light, the spectacle of building tops and streets plunged in monstrous otherness, to no meaning and remembrance dwell no place, but in the blood. Thank you.